Hey, welcome. Today we're jumping into the world of fertility control. It's a huge topic, right? You've got everything from methods that sync up with your body's natural cycle all the way to some pretty advanced medical procedures. So we're going to map out the major categories and get a real feel for how each one works. All right, let's get into it. So, you might be asking, what are all the different ways to manage fertility? Well, you can think of it like a big spectrum. On one end, you have temporary options you might use every day, and on the other, you've got permanent, one-and-done solutions. We're going to walk through that entire spectrum, piece by piece. So here's our game plan. We're starting with natural methods and physical barriers. After that, we'll dive into the science behind chemical and hormonal options. Then we'll check out long-term devices, move on to permanent surgical methods, and finally, we'll cover procedures for medical termination. Okay, first up, natural and barrier methods. These are kind of the old school approaches, and they work in one of two really basic ways. You're either paying close attention to the body's cycle to avoid fertile times, or you're just putting up a simple physical wall to stop conception. A classic example of the natural approach is the rhythm method. You might have heard it called the safe period. The whole idea here is timing. It's all about tracking the phases of the menstrual cycle really carefully to figure out which days are fertile and which, well, aren't. Now, if you're not into the whole timing thing, the other option in this category is a physical barrier. The goal here is way more direct. It's just about physically blocking sperm from getting anywhere near the egg. Simple as that. And here are two perfect examples of how that works. Over on the left, you've got a diaphragm, which is placed to cover the cervix, kind of like a bouncer at a club door. And on the right, the condom, which creates a total physical block. Both are just pure mechanics, nothing else. All right, next section. We're shifting gears now from physical blocks and timing to methods that work on a biochemical level. This is where chemical and hormonal options come in, and they use the body's own chemistry against itself, in a way, to prevent pregnancy. So, on the chemical side of things, we have spermicides. They come in a bunch of different forms, foam, jelly, you name it. And how they work is pretty much what it sounds like. They're made to destroy sperm on contact, stopping them in their tracks. Then, of course, there's the hormonal route, which most of us just call the pill. Oral contraceptives basically work by giving the body hormones that send a signal that tells the ovaries, hey, don't release an egg this month. And if there's no egg, well, there's no chance of a pregnancy. Now, these pills come in all sorts of packs and formats, but they all have one thing in common, and it's absolutely critical. For them to work, you've got to stick to a very specific and consistent schedule. That schedule can change a bit depending on the kind of pill you're taking. You've basically got two main players here. First are the combined pills. You usually take those for about 3 weeks, then take a week off. Then you've got mini pills, which have a different mix of hormones and are taken every single day, no breaks. Which one is right for someone really depends on their individual health. Let's move on to long-term devices. I love that people call these the set-it-and-forget-it methods. Why? Because once a doctor puts one in place, it can offer protection for years without you having to do or think about anything on a daily basis. So one example is the subdermal implant. It's this tiny, flexible little rod that gets placed right under the skin in your upper arm. And from there, it just does its thing, slowly releasing hormones to prevent pregnancy for several years. Another really big long-term option is the intrauterine device, or IUD. And the name tells you exactly what it is. It's a small device that's made to sit right inside the uterus, providing contraception for a super long time. You can see right here what a common T-shaped IUD looks like up close and, how it fits inside the uterus. There are a few different kinds. Some use hormones, some use copper, but they all have to be put in by a medical professional. So what is an IUD actually doing in there? Well, it's pretty clever. It kind of has this two-step defense. Its main job is to create an environment where sperm just can't fertilize an egg. But as a backup, it also prevents a fertilized egg from implanting in the uterine wall. Okay, so we've gone from long-term to permanent. This is the next step up. We're talking about surgical procedures, sterilization, for people who are absolutely sure that they don't want to have children in the future. This is a big decision. For women, the procedure is called a tubectomy, but almost everyone knows it as getting your tubes tied. The surgery does pretty much that. It blocks or cuts the fallopian tubes. This permanently stops eggs from being able to travel from the ovaries down to the uterus. It's like closing off a highway, for good. For men, the procedure is a vasectomy. What happens here is the tubes that carry sperm, they're called the vas deferens, are cut and sealed off. This means that sperm can't mix with semen anymore, ejaculation still happens, but there's just zero chance of it causing a pregnancy. All right, our final category is based on the source material we're looking at today. It covers the medical procedures that are used to terminate a pregnancy. Let's take a look at the two methods that are detailed for us here. The first procedure is called dilation and curettage, or just D&C for short. It's basically a two-step process. First, the cervix is gently widened or dilated. Then, a tool called a curettage is used to clear the lining of the uterus. And the second procedure is vacuum aspiration. This method, as the name suggests, uses gentle suction. A small tube is used to remove the fetus and the placental tissue from inside the uterus. So let's just pull all of this together. What's the big picture here? Well, what we've seen is that the choices for fertility control are just incredibly diverse. They run the whole gamut from temporary, behavioral things you do, all the way to permanent surgeries. And each one works in a totally different way, whether it's a physical block, a hormonal message, or a surgical change. Looking at how all these methods have evolved, it kind of leads to one final big question. We've obviously come a really long way. But as our technology and our understanding of biology just keep getting better and better, what do you think the next generation of fertility control is going to look like?